Hey, this is Aaron Price, the CEO of TechUnited New Jersey, back for another Ask Member Anything today. Really excited to welcome Chris Sullins, the CEO of CentralReach. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So where are you joining us from today?
I'm joining you from my lovely home office.
in what part of the, I'm assuming in New Jersey, but where in the world?
Yeah. So I'm in Rumson, New Jersey. So.
Nice. Are those is that nice artwork behind you, or are those like fancy sound panels for pandemic living?
I wish there were fancy sound panels, but I think it's I don't even know if it's fancy artwork, but it's some kind of
it's just artwork. So for those who are unaware, we're going to go through a little bit of your story here, but what is CentralReach?
So CentralReach is a software provider, software and services, and we make a platform for providers, organizations that work with children who have autism. So essentially our platform helps them manage all the back office processes. So everything from processing claims, managing their customer information, the schedule, as well as kind of any other payments that they would receive kind of from the clients that they work with. And fully integrated into that is the entire clinical side of it. So we actually help them all the way from, the top of, providing kind of the data around assessments for the children and the ability to load that in, the programming that's associated with that, the data collection, all the analysis, everything they need to do to know if the outcomes that they're getting with an individual child are moving in a positive direction or not moving in a positive direction, and being able to then make course corrections and adjustments for that. In addition to that, we also provide some services that kind of wrap around the software, including third-party billing services. So for our clients, if they don't want to manage the complexity of the claims process and they want to outsource that to us, we have a really great team that handles that for a subset of our clients. And then we also provide content, training, and continuing education and kind of credits and units that allow our customers to basically upgrade and maintain the skill of their staff.
So on the practice management side of things, why wasn't a tool like a ZockDoc enough for some of these therapists?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'm not, from a ZockDoc's perspective, if they've got more functionality than I'm going to give them credit for, I certainly am not the full expert. But I think what ZockDoc, at least what it started out to do, is really help to connect people who are looking for services with a provider. And then they may provide some of the back office, but if you think about it in that context, ZockDoc would sit kind of in front of CentralReach. And once they became a client and we were managing some of the, the scheduling complexity after that, and really just processing the claims, I think that's where we sit. And ABA, so Applied Behavior Analysis, which is the process and the way that the majority of the industry works with children who are on the spectrum, has a fairly unique, very data-driven workflow. So there's also, outside of ZockDoc, there's a number of what I'd consider kind of horizontal platforms that process claims with insurance companies, and those do a great job. But the unique aspects of ABA, the intensity with which the services are provided, and the integration in terms of the codes and kind of how you get reimbursement, is somewhat unique to the industry. So there's a value to being very vertically focused and having an application that really looks at dealing with the specific pain points for that industry.
And for those who aren't that familiar with ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis Care, can you just share a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, I mean, at its core, and again, I'm not a behavior analyst, so I always have to be careful about talking about how those on our team that are do their jobs as well as our clients. But at the core, applied behavior analysis is really a very data-driven kind of methodology process where, based on an assessment result for an individual child, programming is developed, and that programming essentially focuses on two kind of core components. One is identifying, I'll say, behaviors or skills that you want that individual learner to acquire, and trying to provide reinforcement so that they not only can demonstrate those skills, but that they become kind of second nature to them, and then continuing to build on that. So it's basically, it's just like the, peeling back the onion. You just continue to kind of build on. You start with a more basic level of skills, and then you become, more and more advanced as you move forward. And at the same time, what you're working to do is to, de-emphasize the negative behaviors that you're working with. So a lot of times, and each child is different, but a lot of times a learner, may get frustrated, or if they're being asked to do something they don't want to do, the manifestation could be something like physical, biting, spitting, kind of running away. And so what a behavior analyst has to do is try to, focus like you would in any setting with a young child, on that skill acquisition, but while at the same time trying to understand what are these negative behaviors that you want to mitigate, and work on both of those in parallel. So from an application standpoint, you've got a pretty complex kind of workflow where you're trying to work in two different dimensions at the same time, and collect data in real time while you're, in person working with that particular learner. So it is it's a challenging job, and it's an important job, and it's one that frankly, there's not enough therapists to work with all the children who are on the spectrum today in the U.S. and certainly globally. And so it's really, it's a rewarding kind of field to be in, for sure.
It's, you mentioned in your description there, when the therapist meets with the child in person, and obviously the pandemic has made that extra challenging. So how have the patients and the therapists dealt with the last 7 months of what's been going on in the world?
Yeah, I would say very creatively, in short. So it's interesting because we're the market leader as a provider. We provide, in terms of our number of customers, we've got well over 1,300 organizations that use our application, and they span from the largest kind of organizations in the world that are providing these services, all the way down to a behavior analyst who's just graduated or started their career and they're hanging out their shingle and kind of working one-on-one with children. So across kind of this full span, we've got about 100,000 employees or so that are employed by organizations that use our application, and upwards of 200,000 learners who they're working with on a regular basis. So from a data perspective, we're in a unique situation to actually look at the industry more broadly and to see those impacts. And so what we saw when the world changed in the middle of March, and things were clamped down, frankly, across the country, was a dramatic drop in terms of services, billable entries, the number of sessions that were being conducted, because they couldn't meet in person. And telehealth, in our industry, really was used very infrequently. And I'll give you some data around that, but It was really used for kind of more of parent support, parent training. It was limited by the payers to like 2 hours a week. And just for
And when you say this,
context,
by the way, just to clarify, you mean it was used historically in this way, or
yeah,
since the middle of
pre-pandemic.
March,
So if you think
pre-pandemic?
about
Yeah,
pre-pandemic, it really wasn't a part of the care
sure.
cycle. And so, um, so when our clients couldn't meet in person, it just halted their business. And so we saw a 50% drop from 1 week to the next in terms of services that were being provided in
Wow.
sessions. And our clients really I think, went into crisis mode. And so luckily the payers, saw this and pretty quickly opened up the kind of way that telehealth could be used by providers to work with clients. And in addition to that, I think, our providers really kind of pivoted and tried to, think about how they could provide services in a way that clients and families would be comfortable with. And so, so what we saw was just like a shock, 50% drop. People were like wondering what was going on. It was very stressful, obviously, for us as a provider, but also for our clients, and mainly for our clients and for the families who had children that now weren't able to get services. And the key to kind of, again, ABA success, I would say, is just consistency, high volume of consistent services that need to be provided. And so these kind of breaks like this are really stressful, especially for the learners who are on the spectrum, who also need a lot of structure and kind of
Yeah.
repeatability. And so this just, it became very stressful kind of all across the board. And what we saw was, while this wasn't necessarily deemed in many of the states as an essential service, I think what we saw was that the families as well as the providers behaved like it was. And so while we had that immediate kind of drop, what we saw in our data was a dramatic shift to telehealth to fill the gap, and then a steady kind of stream of services starting to be provided. Those that were doing it in clinic shifted and pivoted in a lot of ways to try to do it in home, where it could be more one-on-one and in a safer environment. And then they reconfigured their clinics to make it, such that it could be provided in a safer way.
And did
And so,
CentralReach get into this business of the in-home delivery at all, or help manage any of the in-home process?
no. I mean, we really are providing kind of that infrastructure for our clients. So we certainly, we spent a lot of time thinking about, to that end, how can we help, and what can we do, because we all need to make it to the other side. And what there were a couple of things that we did that I think were helpful to the industry. So certainly we were trying to work with clients from a financial standpoint, and how do we leverage our balance sheet as much as we can. Obviously, we're not the biggest company in the world, but to help, kind of mitigate or defer or do certain things like that. In addition to that, I had mentioned this continuing education credit. So for behavior analysts to maintain their certifications, they need to have a certain number of credits on a regular basis to keep that certification. And most of those were delivered in association shows and those kind of things, which were in person, and they all kind of went by the wayside. So we charge for we spent a lot of money. We have a lot of resources developing these courses, and that. And what we ended up doing was, we felt like, for the industry's sake, not just our clients, this was a way we could help. So while they were not, trying to figure out how they were going to work with the clients, they had time And so we opened up our library of CEUs for free to the entire industry, first for 60 days, and then we extended it for another 60 days. Interestingly, we got upwards of almost 75% of every behavior analyst in the industry sign up to take courses, and we saw just the course load take off. So it wasn't one of those things where it's like, I'll just sign up and see. It was actually being used, and the goodwill it created, just a lot of word of mouth referrals, the social media, which again was, that wasn't the goal, but it was great to see that from an industry standpoint, that people really appreciated that as a benefit, or at least as something that they could lean on, while they were working their way through this. We also had just acquired a data collection tool called Thread, and we worked to open that data collection tool. So basically, the way they collect clinical data while they're working with a learner, up for free to clinicians who had lost their job, been furloughed, or weren't actually able to generate income, to try to help them get back on their feet or help them work through this. And we had several hundred of the industry clinicians actually sign up to use the application as well. So so certainly tried to do our part, and I think, again, from the response from our client base as well as just the broader industry, I think it was something that was really well received.
We've talked about, just an organization, about doing well by doing good. This seems like a good example of that. And I just want to make sure I understand that metric you talked about before, because you said 75% of the industry had used the certification platform. I'm assuming that's not 75% of the people who were already customers. This was a good new customer acquisition.
This was, so this was all, so there's about 42,000 board certified behavior analysts. So in terms of how applied behavior analysis is provided, what they call BCBAs, board certified behavior analysts, are really the quarterback of the care. So they're the ones that create the treatment plans, the care plans, based on the assessment data. Those plans are executed by behavior technicians kind of out in the field, who are working predominantly with the clients one-on-one. And then it's the BCBAs that take all that data, analyze it, and make those adjustments to the programming to continue to move the ball forward from that perspective. So so that group is very discrete in this particular case, because they have to go through and get their master's degree, and they've got to go through the BACB kind of program to become a BCBA. And so that was essentially the metric. So it wasn't BCBAs that use CentralReach. It was BCBAs who have actually gotten their certification. So long answer to short question, which was yes, it was a vast number of people who were not using CentralReach or were not a customer of ours.
So I think there's a really fascinating acquisition, learning here, right? I mean, I don't know if you're able to share how many of those. It sounds like you're saying of the 42,000, roughly 30,000 of them use the certification tool or the trainings. Mm-hmm. During the pandemic. I'm sure many of them have. I would guess. I mean, my question for you is how many of those have converted to real customers, and then is there a business learning that you would recommend to people to think about? Things that may be behind a paywall to reconsider, because you can create such great value for a community, and it becomes such a great acquisition. And like I said, I know you didn't do this, to try to necessarily grow revenue, but it sounds like it had a really great potential byproduct for you.
Yeah, it certainly did. I mean, it's a big decision to move to a new EMR system. So, but we did. So we certainly did have, I would say, a good amount. An amount that we feel like was pretty strong, that had chosen to move to CentralReach as a result, or to use our content, which they can use the content, directly. And going back to your point, certainly that was a benefit. That wasn't the driving kind of force behind it. And I think to the point of, once we kind of came to the end, we were specifically kind of as an organization actually did not market to this audience to buy anything from us, and kind of give it some time. So a lot of that actually came in on an inbound way, as opposed to us kind of saying, hey, now that you've used it, you should buy. And we continue to this day to still get customers that kind of are choosing it. Going back to your second question, it did allow us to think differently kind of about it. And I would say in general, it's an interesting, I guess, when you think about your business, sometimes there's just so many different assets. And I would say, you and I know each other, obviously. I have a relationship with TechUnited. I think you've done a really good job of kind of thinking this way with respect to TechUnited, but there's a number of assets that you have within any organization. And sometimes, you need to have a fresh set of eyes or a fresh perspective to say, hey, we could use these differently, as opposed to just continue to send out marketing messages or, content being one of those. So the content's very valuable in any business. And for us, I would say this was kind of, something that we felt strongly about, but I guess, was a little bit outside of the core of what we were doing from a software. And what we've seen was the value of what it was and what it could do. And we've actually now embedded it into our onboarding process. So now we're giving the same content to new clients who choose to use CentralReach while they're working to get live with the software, so that they can get some benefit among their staff. They can start the learning process. They can, and we give it for free. And then, if they want to continue to use it afterwards, they can sign up. So this is something relatively new. And to be honest, if we hadn't done what we had done as part of this pandemic, it probably wouldn't have been something that we would be doing, today. So we definitely applied that more broadly.
I want to spend a little bit of time before we run out of time talking a little bit about your story. With WorkWave, having been the CFO and then the CEO for many years, what would be your top, I don't know, I'll give you some flexibility, 1 to 3 takeaways from that experience?
From WorkWave or from?
Yeah, from WorkWave, and then we're gonna get back to CentralReach.
Good question. There's a lot. So top 3 would be a challenge. What I would say is, and this is gonna, I'll say it, and it's gonna be so obvious. And I always tell people this as I talk about it. Even within the company. But I don't know that organizations really, focus as much as we tried to do in WorkWave, and we certainly do in CentralReach around these things. But what we developed kind of this framework in WorkWave. So when I started with WorkWave, it was about 30, 35 or so folks back in 2008 in the, midst of, so I tend to try to do things, where there's some kind of massive crisis. And we built that over an almost 11-year period before we sold to IFS as a strategic buyer in 2018 or 2017. It was a long journey. And one of the things we did relatively early on was we put a framework in place that basically actually is quite ABA kind of oriented, which I didn't know at the time, but focusing on input. So everybody wants a really good culture. Everybody wants, kind of sticky customers and, people who are talking positively. Obviously, you want profitable growth. But one of the challenges in an organization is reconciling the outputs, which I would consider those, with the things that it takes to get you there, and making sure you're making the investments in the right areas. So for us, we focus on what I call the big four kind of areas, which was hiring and developing talented people, building really great product and doing it as fast as we could. Kind of turning the easiest to say, hardest to do, turning employees and customers into raving fans, and then continuously kind of investing in the infrastructure of the business, systems, process, all these things that you can outgrow and kind of, get a business out of whack. And so when we built that, and I think, again, a lot of people say they care about people, a lot of people say they're product focused. We actually framed our entire board updates around these. So basically every board update on a monthly basis, every board meeting was, what are we doing with people? What are we doing with the product? What are we doing to kind of get customers and employees happy? And what are we doing on systems and process? And we led with that. And then the financials we spent actually much less time on. And I think, so long answer or a long way to say, that's something that we brought to CentralReach and we're applying here as well. And I think it's really important because what it does is help force alignment at the board level. It helps force alignment at the management level, as well as the employee level, to really kind of, be able to all talk the same language. Because what I saw kind of prior to doing this at WorkWave was, a big focus on the board on ROI and, financials and, going through all that. And then we come into the organization, we talk about, well, employees are important and this and that. And you had kind of this, this pull, right?
Yeah.
that over time gets more and more kind of stretched. To try to square those two things. And so I feel like that was a key to our success. We were not perfect. It wasn't a perfect culture. Our customers didn't universally love us. Our employees didn't universally love us. Our products had lots of opportunities to continue to improve, just like they do at CentralReach. But I feel like having that as kind of a beachhead, and when you pair that with a pretty strong, kind of clear mission, then you can make the right investments to kind of drive the business forward. And then those outputs really, kind of flow from there.
Did you find that your board then was more engaged once you had, clarity around those topic areas and more able to focus on what they could do to help if they were able to jump in on things?
Yeah, for sure. I think it changed the nature of the board meetings from just an update on here's what we've done and let's go through the financials, to having more strategic kind of conversations about, where we should invest or how do we accelerate this? Is there an acquisition that we think can plug this hole? And again, it helped us just talk about the things that I think are important, because at the end of the day, if you have really great employees, really strong product, everybody likes doing business with you, and you keep investing in the business, it's pretty hard not to have some good success unless you pick buggy whips as your end market.
That's right. Obviously you're on the board of TechUnited New Jersey, and it's a large group, and I think people have been relatively engaged, but I'm often thinking about the best way to navigate what to share and how to get people engaged. And I wonder if you have not just advice for me, but in general for those managing board meetings and board structure and how to drive the most engagement and value, for and from a board, if you have any advice for that, for those individuals.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I feel like, again, while nothing's perfect, I do think, so if I think about TechUnited, I think you've done a really good job of kind of getting your arms around things. And I feel like, we talk about things at the right level, if you will, kind of balancing strategic and just tactical, and certainly with a big board, it makes it harder. So the boards that I've worked with, and typically, the board of a company, unless you're a public company, you're not have 20, 30 people to kind of constituents, it's a little bit
Yeah.
clearer. But what I'd say, one of the things that's been helpful for me, one is to be on the board of like TechUnited. I'm also on the board of another private equity backed kind of company called Culture IQ.
No,
And
Greg, another
having,
New Jersey guy, big fan.
yeah. And having that perspective, I think actually helped me to do a better job managing the board. So what I would say, again, a longer answer to the short question is, I think, thinking about putting yourself in a board member's shoes and really teeing up content and making it less about, hey, here's how great we did on all these tasks. And I think when I think about my first board meetings and how I've evolved over time, and that's, again, I'm not perfect, but very task oriented, very update oriented. Hey, we got, this thing done. And as a board member, it's really hard to like sift through all of the tasks to know, are we on the right track to where we're going to go? Or, are we off?
Yeah.
Or I can't really tell where we are on the journey. And so I think, just somebody who then is sitting on the other side, I think the more that leaders can really keep that in front and not take for granted that the board knows and is thinking always like, here's where we want to get to, right? 5 years from now, 10 years from now, this is what we want to be. And here's where we are. And here's where we're focused. And this is why we think this is taking us in that direction. Then the board can kind of say, well, if this is where we want to go, I'm not sure why we're doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so kind of continuously connecting the where we want to go with what we're doing today, I think leads to more productive board conversations, at least in my experience.
Yeah, I like that. I know we're a couple minutes over, so I guess there's one other question for you, which is, our community is about helping one another out. And so for those who are interested in potentially helping you out, what would your ask be of the TechUnited New Jersey community?
Yeah. Well, I'd say first and foremost, like send super talented people our way. So, we certainly clamped down like most people as we worked our way through the pandemic and just tried to figure out, like, are we going to get to the other side? And if we do, what's it going to look like?
Can you say definitively at this point, by the way, like, okay, it's going to work out, you're going to make it to the other side? Or are you still in that red zone?
No, so I talked about how, the billings and kind of the billable entries had dropped by 50%. When you look at our business today, we've essentially had what I consider a checkmark recovery. So I've heard V and I've heard K and all these things, but we are, call it, and our customers, like when you look at our customer base, they're anywhere from 10 to 20% up above where they were pre-pandemic at their peak.
Oh, wow.
And so again, I would say I'm cautiously optimistic. Obviously, there's a lot going on right now, and certainly with COVID and the spikes, and you never know, what that could mean. But we have pivoted in a pretty strong way towards growth. I mean, certainly we continue to invest throughout. So it wasn't like we put our head in the sand and said, let's hope.
Yeah.
We made a lot of investments as we worked, and we're luckily able to keep, our staff and really not have to do anything unnatural to get to the other side, I would say.
Yeah.
And at this point, we're looking at a number of acquisitions, and we've, really are now trying to, I'd say, catch up and then make sure that we get people in the right spots for us to accelerate the investment in 2021. So we have, I think at this point, somewhere between 15 and 20 open positions, and we've filled a number already across engineering, user experience, design, QA, product. So I would say that would be the biggest help. And I think the second one for us is we have grown a lot in New Jersey. So I was employee number one. We're a Florida-based company in New Jersey back in July of 2018. We have over 75 folks here today. And really, I'm a big fan. New Jersey's got pros and cons, and it's not perfect either. But
There's
this is the
cons?
second time
I don't know about cons.
this is the second time I'm scaling something up in New Jersey. So there's super strong talent here, and we want to grow our team all across the country, but certainly in New Jersey as well.
I actually think one of the really interesting long-term pandemic benefits or outcomes really is that a lot of the talent that's been traveling to New York City is, they're taking another look at what's going on in their backyard. And I think, companies like yours are able to capitalize on some of that opportunity and some of that talent pool. And personally, I think we're going to see a dramatic shift in urban work over the next decade because of this whole thing. And I think companies like CentralReach, in a market like this where you could still live near a major city, but maybe you don't necessarily want to commute every day, are going to have an opportunity to really take advantage of that. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there are a few cons, but not many. We have a good time. We really like it. Well, we've gone a little bit over here, but I really, really appreciate your time. For those interested in learning more, check out CentralReach.com. Chris, thanks so much for joining us today on our Ask Member Anything. Really appreciate everything you do, not just for New Jersey, but especially for TechUnited. So thanks a lot. Really appreciate you being here today.
Thanks, Aaron. This is great. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Yep.
Bye-bye.